right, are we ready, Doctor?
We are, Mr. Chair.
All right, I would like to call this Monday evening, November 16th, Finance and Operations meeting to order. I believe it is 5:32. All right, do you want to put the agenda up, Doctor?
I think I've got it up. Can people see it?
It is.
Okay.
Okay, maybe it's me. There we go. Oop.
He's working with new technology, so
I am, sorry.
No worries.
he's in transitional period right now.
This is new technology and it seems to be working okay, but it just flashed off the screen, so. All right, so the first item on the agenda is we're going to talk about planning for our full in-person learning on January 4th.
If it's okay with the chair and the committee, I would like to take item 3 and 5 first, because they're
Okay.
fairly quick hits. And
Are we okay with that, committee?
I'm fine.
Okay. Then you can proceed, Doctor. Thank you. Did we lose you?
He's frozen.
I knew it would happen eventually.
The poor guy. The stress got to him.
Too.
Ed, is that you? You and
Yes, it
Lisa?
looks like Jim froze too.
Oh, Jim froze too.
Either that or he's sitting very still.
That's good, though. It
Who's
shows
gonna
Uh,
give the update? Is that you, Ed and Lisa?
I'm shutting my video off. That might be part of it.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
too
I'm gonna
handsy.
have to too,
Can't
because
handle it.
I think everybody froze.
Yeah.
Are you good now? So Frank, we're talking about the fiscal year 21 budget update.
Yes.
So is that, who's gonna present that to us? Lisa, Ed? Did you guys freeze again? I can see Carla. I see Tom.
I'm here, but I know Dr. Hackett has something to present related to that.
Okay, let's see if he gets back up live. So while we're waiting for them to come in,
Expenditures of some of that. So,
oh, there we go. Okay.
There we
There we
go.
go. We got you now.
all right.
Hey, I lost you again.
I had a great intro.
Didn't hear any of it.
Missed it all.
Like it never happened.
Can you
wanna-
hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
All right.
I had to turn my video off too. I don't know. My screen kept freezing, so I think you all know what I look like. So hopefully
Not the same without the picture.
It really isn't.
it isn't.
Yeah.
Teach me how
Okay.
to put video, different things up and I will.
Everyone can see the spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Ed or Lisa, one of you want to take us through this?
So I can talk a little bit about this. I put it together. So for COVID expenditures, we've actually received a number of grants from the state. And this spreadsheet outlines at the top 3 grants that we've received and sort of what they were broken down for, the totals of each of the grants, and then the grand total of the 3 of them combined. I did very generic categories on these, but the CVRF is the school reopening grant. That was a large grant that we received totaling $1.271 million. The next one is the ESSER CARES grant. This was actually the first grant that we received that became available after the CARES Act was passed back in the spring, but I don't remember the exact time frame. And then the last one is this remote learning technology grant, which is basically a return to school grant and some additional funding around technology for that. I just did a quick summary at the bottom to give you a snapshot of what kind of technology purchases that we've made. related to these grants and just related to kind of COVID and, providing support for students and our faculty and staff. So if you'll notice, we've actually purchased 700. We physically have received 700 Chromebooks, and we're waiting on another 1,000 Chromebooks. We've purchased a variety of laptops, iPads, monitors, and some other miscellaneous type items. So that's what you see on this document here.
Thanks. Lisa, Jim, do you want, because you've been managing that middle grant, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Say that again. Talk to this one.
If maybe Jim could speak to the CARES grant, the ESSER.
Well, obviously, there's some costs in there around technology that we've
Oh, we're having some internet
with
issues.
other local private schools that were eligible under the same grant format. So as you can see, between cleaning supplies and technology, we've spent the vast majority of it. There's a little bit of PD money in there that we use to prepare for the opening of the school year. But this money will be expended probably prior to the end of the calendar year.
Okay. Does anyone on
Mr.
the?
Chair,
Yes, sir.
through the chair, as I see some of these three grants, I noticed something that the first one, which is the CVRF school reopening, administration, personal, and all things that go with that. I'd like to see some type of a breakdown on that where it's, $300,000. Okay, based on what, for who, for where, PPE and all things that go with that. Now, the middle one, the Esser CARES, I can see that's more of a breakdown. But I mean, if I go sideways and I just go off technology, 550, 240, and 146, I mean, that's almost $900,000 that we put towards technology. I'd really like to see where the heck that went. I mean, I know that we are down when I see something that says laptops 100 plus, we have to have some type of a number, right?
We do. Is it okay if I answer, Frank? Dr.
Yeah,
Heck?
no, absolutely.
Okay, so I can speak to that. So on the CVRF school reopening grant, the $300,000 is actually for personnel, like substitute costs. So we've had to hire a number of people or cover absences, and that funding covers those expenditures. If I can try to share my screen, I can show you some detail behind that in Munis that will inform those conversations. Can you see my screen that looks like Munis?
Not yet, but
Not yet.
give
Not
us a
yet.
second. I just gave you permission, so go ahead and see if you can
Okay.
share again.
All right, try that. Okay.
Yep. Got it.
So I have a couple of things that are open here. So this is the Munis dashboard, which I'm not sure that anybody has seen it yet. So this will be a nice foray into what Munis looks like and how user-friendly it is. And I get very excited about this. But anyway, so here in the Munis dashboard, I've actually opened up a couple of specific applications for you guys to look at. The first is our COVID expense line. So what we've done to date is any expenditures that we've incurred related to COVID, we have loaded them all into this one holding account. It's a generic account that allows us to just keep track of all the COVID expenses and what they are. So if you'll see there, the available budget is, there's no budget dollars because we don't budget in this line. But currently with all the actual expenditures, the encumbrances and the requisitions, we're at $1.8 million, almost $1.9 million. Embedded in this is some additional detail. So I'll get down to this section here. Within Munis, we can drill down through different transactions to see what something may be. So we can look at actual expenditures or encumbrances or requisitions to see kind of where they are. Let me just change my screen. I'm just going to drill down into one of these items just so that you can get an idea of what we're looking at here. That screen that I'm looking at there, it doesn't give you the specific detail. You have to kind of click into it, but there's different ways to get at the information. So in this, it shows we've purchased filters, some portable items, and that's not a valid item, but it's expenditures that are on this transaction. I'm going to pop over to this other screen, which is actually a little bit easier. This is another view of the same page. So if we click into the folder, this is a breakdown of all the expenditures that we've had year to date. So these first couple of items, those are payroll expenses. So when you see on that spreadsheet, $300,000 for personnel cost, it's specifically related to these type of expenditures here. And these are, as I mentioned, they're substitute costs, temporary substitutes. They cover if somebody, say for instance, is a 0.8 and then they picked up an additional 0.2 of work time that is specifically COVID related, those expenses are being charged here. For other types of things, just an easy item to look at is we've purchased some iPads from Apple or laptops here from GovConnection. We can drill down into those transactions. This particular invoice here is scheduled to be paid on November 25th. So I'm not sure how much detail I'll be able to show you, but it gives you an idea of what we're looking at and how the system works. So I could show you here. So this is some Dell laptops and we can look at the invoice for the specifics of those items. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Devon.
Okay, so what part of this is we are receiving assets. So I'd like to think that we will have a true accounting of all the assets we've purchased, where they are. So at the end of the year, we'll be able to reconcile where those actual assets are, right?
Yeah, so we actually use a barcode scanner inventory system. So we tag each asset, to use a term, that comes in and with a barcode and a scanner. So we can track all of our purchases and inventory and have been. I didn't really prepare to talk about tonight, but if the committee would like to have Rebecca Kidwell come in, she can take you through that process if you'd like at a future meeting.
Well, I think excuse me, still through the chair.
Yes,
With all
sir.
due respect, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like any business, and not that we're a business, but where we're accumulating all these assets, we should have what assets are ours now, so that at the end, and I'll tell you what, as we are sitting at any given time, we should know what assets we have on hand, so that later on, if we disperse assets one way or another, that is part of our financial responsibility to the people of Braintree, letting them know where their assets are.
And you'd be pleased to know that we do have that. So I don't
Excellent.
have the inventory in front of me, but it might be worth it for you to, for us to have Rebecca come in to the next meeting anyway and call in and just kind of show how we handle that process. Because you're right. And they've worked really hard. Tech's worked really hard to make sure that we are tracking the assets, and they've got a good system set up for it.
Okay, and
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. And Doctor, we would also be able to see where they're deployed.
I believe so. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions, Ms. Saros or anyone else on the subcommittee?
Can someone just ooh and ah a little bit over Munis and what you're looking at? Do you all remember where we?
This is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Been like,
How did I do?
I do have one quick question, Dr. Hackett.
yes, sir.
Are these invoices for the COVID money, are they going through the same process as far as signatures with the school committee?
They are.
So they're part of the packages that are being signed off on?
Correct. They are part of the warrant.
Perfect. Okay.
We're just
Excellent.
trying to keep them in an account so that we can then, in this case, certainly divvy them out to the grants. Of that 1.8 million you saw in there, approximately 679,000 was given to the town that they'll put in for the FEMA money. And then the percentage that FEMA doesn't reimburse will go into one of the town cares grants. So there's also the potential, as Jim said, that the money is done. Certainly the big COVID, the 1.271 million COVID grant, that has to be spent out by December 30. There's a decent chance that we get more COVID money from the federal government, either during lame duck or after the inauguration. And again, if we can keep the money that we're spending on COVID in one place, we'll then be able to divvy it out to those grants as they come in.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. And just one other question. This Munis is great. Thank you, Dr. Hackett, I agree. As far as access, because I know we used to get printed reports for the subcommittee meetings, especially as we go into budget season. Is there an ability for us to have some level of access just to look at things, or how does that work?
Yes, there is a year-to-date spending report that looks almost identical. Actually, it does look identical to the Balance One report. The problem with it right now is that we have not moved payroll over to Munis yet. Therefore, we have not been able to encumber payroll. So, it shows a lot more money available than is really available. Hopefully, as we get later into the year, and if we do start, going towards Munis, we will be able to get that's money encumbered. Also, for example, this COVID account is showing spending of 1.8 something million dollars or encumbered that actually has not been budgeted for in this operating budget. But this makes it look like it has, so that we can track it. So that throws the number off a little bit. But to answer your question, you will be able to get a better level of detail of spending and budgeting from Munis than we ever were able to from SoftWrite. Plus, we could dump it easily into an Excel spreadsheet and play around with it any way we want.
Okay, I think what I'm asking is, as we, and I know we're a little premature, but as we start to use more technology as a committee, is there a way, rather than having you print out a 30-page report, for us to have some level of access to look at it on our own?
That's a policy decision, I believe, that
I'm
you
not
guys would have to
sure.
talk about.
We'll ask the question. I mean, part of your, the other question that comes behind that is, who else would be accessing, like town council? So I'm not sure that, generally this is an administrative piece of software that would be behind, kind of would be our working software and behind the scenes, and we could produce reports. The beauty is we could produce reports as soon as we are really into it, pretty much whatever you'd like to see. The other piece I just mentioned, that the payroll module, because of COVID and other issues, has been delayed in terms of implementation. So to Ed's point, this year is still going to have 1 foot in the SoftWrite world, 1 foot in Munis, and then even potentially, as we've done over the last couple of years, dumping information into spreadsheets. So the good news is that we are, the expenditure is all in here, and then we should be on target to be fully implemented for Munis for the next fiscal year.
Okay, well, most software, and I guess that's the question, most software usually has different levels of access.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to gather. Is there a level of access for us so that you don't have to, we can make on-demand reports and you don't have to print out reports for as we get into budget season, which is a short time away.
Right. We'll have the conversation. And again, our budget development, I believe, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but we probably will be building the budget this year in SoftWrite mainly.
Yeah, so it's a combo, and I'll probably do the majority of my work, as I've done in the last couple of years, in Excel. It's right now with things being on both sides, it's easier to manage that way. So I think most of it will be Excel-based this year.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
certainly, once this gets going and we get history and things built into the new system, a request for a report can be printed out in a PDF version and emailed out within a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr.
Yes.
Kokoris? From,
I have none. Any other questions from the subcommittee? Ms.
No, sir,
Saros?
thank you.
I think Ms. Saros, did you have a question?
No, I said no.
Okay,
Yeah, my
No.
question was answered.
okay, we're ready to move on. Dr. Hackett?
Lisa, if you could stop sharing, I will take the reins over.
Done.
Perfect. With enthusiasm.
What a smooth handoff.
Yeah, don't,
Right.
well, it's in my hands right now, so let's not, all right. Okay, just back to the agenda.
There we go. Oh,
You do have in your email packet information on student activity account. We're asking, as we do every year, this kind of a two-part process because this year's been obviously very different, where we were going to ask you to approve the year of graduation or the class accounts, and Ed can talk a little bit more about those. And then as we go, we'll be bringing to you those activities that are actually going to be running. We do already have some going at the high school, but it's been a little bit difficult to get off the ground. So at your next meeting, likely we'll have the activities that are running for the high school, East and South Middle School, which is where we have the student activity accounts. So Ed, I don't know if you want to give any more detail.
Only that right now at the high school, the accounts are still, I noticed today, labeled as senior account, junior account, sophomore account, freshman account. We do want to get them to turn them to graduating class year accounts. Much similar, very similar, in fact, exactly similar to what we are doing at the middle school. So when the class accounts start at the middle school, it travels all the way to graduation with that class.
So
okay.
all we'd be asking from you, from the subcommittee, would be to, and you don't need to do it tonight. I mean, this eventually needs to go to the school committee for approval. But if you need more information, you can let us know. I think we're probably going to be scheduling another finance and operations meeting. I'm guessing, I'm just feeling like we're going to be meeting a little bit more regularly. So, you have it tonight. You can review it, and then if you have any questions, we can cover those at your next meeting.
Okay, so Doctor, are you asking us to do a vote just to approve the accounts? Would that be
No,
helpful tonight?
No, because the school committee needs to approve the accounts. So I'm just asking you, you've received the information. If you have questions, we'll talk about it at the next. And then if you could, at the next meeting, recommend to move forward to the full school committee.
Okay, is that the will of the subcommittee?
I do have a
Everyone?
question, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, Mr. Devon.
It's about clarification. What we're trying to do now is any freshman year that comes in, rather than naming them freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, we will name them year of graduation class, right?
Correct.
Seems to me that's kind of a no-brainer. It's procedural, and yet I wonder why we didn't go to this earlier. Or was it just because of old ways of doing things? We're still trying to
Tradition.
rip that apart.
Yep, tradition.
Great. One of those traditions that doesn't really work. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no problem moving forward with the name
Thank
change.
you. Thank you, Mr. Devon. Ms. Saros, any questions?
Nope, it should be your graduation, that's all.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
And just clarification, Ed, if you would, if a class does not spend their money as per the policy in the senior year, can you speak to what happens?
As per the policy, they have the opportunity to either donate it back as a gift to either the high school or to another class coming along. They can also take it after 6 months, I believe it is, of graduation, so we can get any end of year bills paid and settled. Then the money is given to the class officers for them to deal with, do what they want with in the future for reunions or whatever it may be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Doctor, I think we're ready to move on.
I think we're, yeah, on and backwards. So on item number 2, planning for January 4, 2021, return to full in-person learning. As you know, as we've talked administratively as a committee, we have identified January 4th as the target for returning all students in person, full day, every day. So it's going to require obviously planning, which administratively we've already done a lot of work on this, and we know some of the different decisions we're going to have to make. But I think it's important for us and for you as a subcommittee, and really as a conduit to the school committee, to help us. We're looking for your help in this process. We want to make sure that you understand, and I know you do, the challenges that we face with it, and talk about it from all aspects, from resources to timelines to key decision points to right to implementation questions and concerns. So this tonight really is an opportunity, I think, just kind of open the process and kind of create a plan to plan. Understanding that we're targeting January 4, 2021. We also know that a lot of things can happen, and we're seeing some spikes right now within not only the country but Massachusetts, and in numbers that have been higher within the community within Braintree. We continue to there's continues to be no evidence that the virus is being transmitted within our schools. And that's because we've obviously been thoughtful about our protocols, which, there's been some pros and cons in some of the protocols too. There's always obviously trade-offs with certain decisions you make. We have tried to err always on the side of safety, understanding also that we just don't know everything we need to know or should know about the virus. So you all know the challenges. Our biggest issue really, and we experienced it today, some last week, but our biggest issue is staffing. And if we have staff who are identified, either who are test positive, which has been pretty rare, or identified as a close contact, we lose that staff member and the kids within those classrooms for essentially 14 days. And that has been really the biggest challenge for us on a daily basis, is trying to stay operational. But we've been able to do it. And I think we've really done it reasonably well. And it's been because of the hard work of our teachers and our administrators, just really kind of day to day, taking where the day takes us and making the adjustments we need to make. Today was a little scarier because we have 8 drivers who have been identified as close contacts. That happened this morning, that we came upon the information as we had cohort A already in school. So we were definitely scrambling. I'm pleased to report that the transportation department, we've worked on it all day long. We will be able to continue to provide transportation as we have scheduled it for cohort A in the morning, B in the afternoon, as well as for the middle school, as scheduled as we have been doing. So we've been able to combine some routes, condense some of the routes as well, and we're still okay to go. But that's really maybe too long of an introduction to how I'm viewing this, Mr. Chair, and certainly looking for direction.
No, thank you, Doctor. I think there's a couple of things that, as a subcommittee, and I'd certainly like to hear the comments of the other members, but I think what we envision over the next few weeks is to sit down and talk about the things that this subcommittee is responsible for, the finance and operations aspects of getting back fully to school by January 4th. So we'd like, I think we want you to be open and transparent with us. We want to talk about all the details that are pertinent to this subcommittee. And, if we need to meet once or twice a week between now and that time with, understanding there's holidays there as well, we want to make sure that we fully understand what's necessary so we can hit that date. And I think you made some very good points. We have to work on that schedule separately from what happens day to day with this fluid situation with COVID. And I guess the only thing we can do as a subcommittee and as a community is just ask people to be diligent about the things that are being stressed as far as ways to prevent the spread and, behaviors and activities outside of school that would challenge us to get to that date. So, again, I would love to hear from the subcommittee, but I believe it's our intent to, look at each of those aspects that we need to put in place so that we can get fully back to school for January 4th. So I'll open it up to the subcommittee for any comments or questions.
I have a few, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Devon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things that I find shocking. One is that we have so many, shall we say, bottlenecks that the average person doesn't understand. Getting a call this morning at like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, knowing that some of our drivers have to be quarantined and transportation, because we don't get 45 kids on a bus, we only get, say, 20, 25. That is a glaring problem to try and get by. And the fact that to get a person to become a qualified driver, you just can't take a person off the street and put them in the seat. They have to go through schooling and a licensure procedure that, shall we say, is important to the safety of our children. So it's not just a group that we can have expand and contract. There again, other towns are trying to do the same thing we are, and they're getting their bus drivers and keeping them. So when I hear that this morning, it was shocking. And I think it's important that we let the parents know some of these pitfalls that we deal with, not just on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis, that we're getting some of these emergencies that will crop up halfway through the day, or obviously on a daily basis, that think the topography in which we're trying to operate on shifts beneath our feet hourly. And I think it's important that we let the people know this. It helps with their understanding what our severe problems are in trying to accomplish these 6 different types of school situations we're dealing with, your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school that are distance learning versus the hybrid that we're doing at the elementary, middle, and high school. So it's almost 6 different school systems we're trying to go forward with varying degrees of success. I think they should know exactly where we are on these situations. It'll help them know what our problems are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that, Mr. Devon. Thank you. Ms. Saros?
Correct me if I'm wrong, with that certain circumstance, with the bus drivers not being able to pick up or whatnot, everything needs to shift. The notification system we're using is Parent Square, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so shouldn't there have been some kind of alert through there? Like, if that's the way we're supposed to be contacted, shouldn't that have been done? And
So,
if it was, where would it, would it have come directly from the school or from you guys?
so you mentioned a situation about an individual school to me that I need to follow up on, but we brought the principals together at 9 o'clock, Jim and I, and again at 10 o'clock to just figure out what our next steps were going to be while transportation was trying to figure out the rerouting. We made the decision because what was coming down to is if we cannot get B, but first of all, we had to figure out how to get A home.
Yeah.
And then if we can't get B in, what are we going to do? Do we run the day as we would have and have those students who are able to get transported come, or would we have B go remote? We obviously want to protect the learning time, the in-person learning time. So the principals identified those students who were in cohort B, who were scheduled to be here this afternoon, and called them individually who had transportation to ask the question, if we can't transport you, are you going to be able to get in and out of school? The only situation we had where we had to provide transportation for cohort B was at Liberty. So if I could, Ms. Saros, just maybe talk to you offline and get a little bit more information on that. But we reached out and made the personal contact because of the timing and just, you know, the complication of what was going on.
Thank you, Ms. Saros.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I just would add in just another kind of, I think it's important for everyone to understand that a lot of school systems, in fact, the majority of school systems, contract their transportation through a outside vendor. We actually hire our own drivers and we lease our buses over a 3-year period. So one of the challenges we have is we don't have an economy of scale. I mean, first student can, if they have an issue at Randolph, they can pull from Holbrook, or just obviously giving some examples, they can shift their people around, they can shift their equipment around. Our challenge is that our drivers are our drivers and our equipment is our equipment. So, you know, to Mr. Devin's point, we don't have, you know, it is not easy to get a school bus driver's license. Thankfully, it shouldn't be. So depth is always a problem. And that's why we started the school year by, in where we are, of saying we've got to make sure what's the guaranteed level of service that we can provide. And that guaranteed level of service has to be what the law requires, which is more than 2 miles for K through 5. So we are doing that. If, for example, we had expanded more than that, we would be having probably a different conversation about the rest of this week, because we would really have struggled to take on much more coverage. So that's the challenge we face. And you know, what I'm concerned about, or what we need to figure out, I should say, is if we are, as we talk about January 4th, we have got to figure out the transportation situation. We got to figure that out anyway. But right now, you know, the state guidance, and they had a diagram on it showing how students sit on a bus, and we have 25 students on a passenger bus that at 3 to a seat can carry over 70 at the elementary level. Generally, we run a little over 50. So our capacity is anywhere from 50% to 75% reduced right now. And we've got to talk about how to deal with that. And really the only conversation is reducing that distancing. And the Department of Ed, the state really hasn't, that I've seen, given any good guidance or additional guidance about distancing on buses, but that has to be part of the conversation we have as we move forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Doctor. And I think we're saying the same thing. As a subcommittee, what we'd like to be able to bring back to the full committee is a report on all the pieces that need to come together so that we can be back fully in school on January 4th. So transportation would be definitely a key piece of that discussion. And I certainly hope that we'll, spend the time, because I think Mr. Devin's correct. We have to spend the time to go through each of the levels that we have, because the needs are different, right? The needs are different at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level, depending on, what we decide for on transportation and other things. So I think that's key in the discussions over the next couple of weeks, is that we talk about each one of those things and the challenges. I will say that, and I think some others on the subcommittee would agree, that we've had varying degrees of guidance from the state and from, obviously others on many parts of this situation, none that we can really take fully and use to execute. So I think we have to look at what we get for guidelines as exactly that, guidelines, or, maybe a framework, but we've got to decide what's best for the children of Braintree and the staff, and, what we can accomplish to get children and everybody back to school January 4th. I think, part of the problem in the spring, and I think most parents were frustrated with us as much as we were frustrated with everything else, is that the guidance was limited and it came in, dribs and drabs. It didn't come in time for us to make any of the critical decisions we had to make about education. And I think it's been the same. There's been a lot of rhetoric. There's been press conferences that we've listened to where there's discussion about, regardless of the COVID map, unless it's completely red, kids should be back in school fully and in-person learning. We know that the execution of that, as we're talking about tonight, is going to be a challenge, and is a challenge every day. So, I want us as a subcommittee and, with a full committee to come back with a really strong plan so that we can execute on it January 4th. I think that's what the goal is that we all have tonight.
And of course, for us, we have, it goes without saying, we have our principals, our leadership team, our directors, who then also are working with staff. We have our transportation, food service, we have all of those people at the table, and we will just continue to work through and bring back those conversations and any resulting recommendations to you for you to have conversations around. And we'll try to do it in a way that captures the, some of those discussions too, so that you can understand the complexity of what we're trying to figure out. And I think, that's been missing to points that have already been made. We are trying every single day to think about how to get kids back full-time and in person. And every single day we are making adjustments to get through the day. And so that's not visible to anybody because we're doing our job, which is what we're supposed to be doing. But I think it would be helpful for us to try to put that thinking and that planning out in the public realm a little bit more. And I think that, part of the conversation we need to have too, or we could do administratively, is the same discussion on the same kind of process we used for the elementary expansion, which was to get a key group of stakeholders together and to have some of those discussions and do some planning in that group as well. And then find ways to broaden out feedback on that. And the beauty of what we're doing right now is, although it's not that far away, it's still far enough away to give us time to, I think, more thoughtfully develop recommendations and also get feedback from a larger audience.
No, I agree. And I think when we can be a little more open here about the challenges that are ahead of us, I think it'll take away some of the frustration. I think that, the blessing we have is that our staff has worked so well with us, and all the groups together have really, gotten us to the point that we're at today. And it's just, I think it'll take a lot of the noise away from the parents who really don't see what's been happening behind the scenes, and I can understand that. Hopefully when they see these meetings and we get into the full committee, they'll understand all the challenges that are on the table that need to be addressed so that we can do this safely and efficiently on January 4th. So thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Devon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair. Dr. Hackett, look, I think we're on plan, I think 12 or 13. As far as the different types of thought process that went into opening schools, the different types of groups that we're going to have in. So there have been so many different plans that we've tried to, shall we say, apply, and for one reason or another, they've failed. I think it's important that we let the people know, the pinch points, the things that are physically impossible to do, and what the percentages are. The fact that if people decide to go all full remote, okay, great. We, there again, we've always had that attitude that, okay, we can't switch to full remote. We have a plan to do that. We're working on that plan to get everyone back in some semblance of full time in all the different segments that are in between. And again, if we allowed them, the parents and the people of Braintree, to know how difficult it is, the fact that we're trying to come up with some type of a plan for the middle schools, and that's proving to be problematic. I think if we share those types of situations with them, they become what they are. They understand, and they'll have to come to understand that this is just not plugging children in. And that even saying that makes me shudder to think that we're just going to plug children in. Good God, it sounds horrific. The care that has to be taken with some of our, vulnerable students and some of our gifted students and all the different segments in between. If we let them know what those challenges are, I think, hey, maybe we get an idea that no one's thought of. I think that we're smart enough to understand that maybe someone will have an idea that will work. But there again, let them know exactly how difficult this process has been for months. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. And I think it's important, I hear your comments, Mr. Devon, but I think it's important also to note that 70% of our parents prefer to have their students back in school in some capacity. So while
Yes.
there's always that option to go remote, I think as we get closer to fully back in school, I think we'll see that number jump. I think we'll see that number rise.
Here, here.
So thank you. Ms.
And
Saros,
just to
any-
clarify, when we're talking about full person, in-person full, the full remote option will remain for the rest of the year. And that, we will continue to provide parents and students with the option to be full remote. What we're talking about is essentially shifting out of the hybrid schedule into what would be a more traditional schedule. So
Thanks for that clarification, Doctor. Ms. Saros, any comments?
I'm just thinking, and I've been saying it for months now, the testing, like if we could somehow get the testing, that's how you're going to get them in. Kid has a symptom, test them immediately and they can get in, decreasing to 3 feet. It's, I don't know. I know it's not easy and these little fires keep popping up, but the kids do. I mean, my daughter came home and hasn't been so happy in a long time. And she was so excited to finally, it was such a good day with her teacher in her they're finally back in their classroom. So, I mean, we just have to keep pushing.
you're exactly right. We just
No,
got
that's-
to keep planning.
That's great. And I think you make a really key point. When we have these discussions over the next few weeks, testing has to be part of those conversations. We have to talk about everything that's necessary, what resources Dr. Hackett and his team need in order to make this happen and be successful. So I think all those things are extremely important.
I would just ask, Mr. Lee, anything you want to add, or Ms. Cronin, did I leave anything out that might want to be mentioned tonight, or are we good?
No, just the nature of the ongoing work. I mean, there are committees of teachers and administrators at the high school level, at the middle school level, and at the elementary level on an ongoing basis, reviewing what the options are and how we move closer and closer to that January 4th goal. There are a lot of issues that need to be overcome in order to get there. And I totally agree with the idea that, letting people understand what the challenges are will help them understand what the process looks like and why it looks the way it does. To get people back full time, we're talking 3 feet or less. And that's going to be a process that we need to take very seriously as we get to a plan that makes sense at each individual level.
If I could add to that, there are also a lot of facility spaces that historically we have used that we may not be able to use. There's also the issue of money, what this committee is all about. In order to get to 3 feet, how many additional classrooms are we going to need air purifiers for? So there are lots of things like that that have to go into this.
Agreed, agreed. Traffic flow. I think Dr. Hack and I have talked about that over the last couple of weeks. You know, when we talk about the high school, we have to understand how we'll make the traffic flow and how we'll cut the traffic down so that we don't have as much exposure as we would in a normal, you know, under normal circumstances. So those are all the things that I think we can tackle. And again, if we need to meet a couple of times, if we need to have groups come and present to us, whatever we need to do to understand all those challenges and plan, I think that's what we're committed to do.
So, Mr. Chair, I would, and maybe you and I can talk offline about what kinds of information, or the committee members can email me. I have a pretty good idea of starting points for data that we already have. To Mr. Lee's point, of conversations and updating you on conversations that have been happening, you know, and really just start to, you know, get at these categories from transportation to facilities and capacity to education, scheduling, to testing, you know.
Lunch philosophy.
Yes, right. And then try to get the big categories spelled out, and then fill in, you know, and have conversations around how we approach the work.
Yeah, let's work on that, Doctor, before our next meeting, so that we have kind of a roadmap that we follow.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other comments before we move on?
I'll send my ideas. I have a few more.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Doctor, I think you had a facilities update next.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so what I want to do is just give you a snapshot, whoops, not that one, of the facilities work and the testing that we've been doing and how we've been approaching the testing and approaching the work. So part of what I think has been
We lose Dr. Hackett?
You freeze them?
Not on purpose. Mr. Lee, are you there? There's something seems to be on this side of town, the three of us.
Oh, boy.
Okay, we'll give him a minute to come back.
Wow.
Ed, are you with us?
Nope.
I am.
Uh-huh.
Do you know where he was going on facilities?
so
I'm
I'm
there
back.
he is. Okay. Welcome back.
I'm going to tell you something. I just did about a 3-minute riff that I thought was brilliant, and I just know I'm not going to be able to recreate it. But
I'm sorry we missed it.
all right. So what I was saying to myself apparently was that we've done a lot of work with ventilation testing, and we've done a lot of work, more importantly, on fixing, repairing, and upgrading pieces of our HVAC equipment. And I think that, you know, we talked about the ventilation testing, which I'm sharing with you just a sample or example of this. This is actually South Middle School, but we have been not waiting to get the test results done before we do anything. So it's been an iterative process for us. We go in, we find out from the testing which rooms are passing and which rooms need some kind of mitigation, or which rooms we can't even get data on. And then we send the test company away, the engineering firm away, and we bring in our HVAC people to go in and do repairs. And then we bring the testing company back in. So that's been how we've had to handle it. And had we waited for everything to be tested and then just posted that and then not done the work and gone back and forth and clearing these rooms, then we would be a lot further behind than we are. And it has been a challenge. I mean, there's no question. I mean, South is a good example, but all of our schools are good examples. The schools were built all prior to really special education being such a large component of what we do. We didn't have speech and language therapists. We didn't have physical therapists. We didn't need those small group spaces. So what has happened over the course of years, and we are not unique to this, is that classrooms have been split up into multiple spaces. So nobody was thinking about ventilation back when that was happening. And what we have found, and not surprisingly, is that a classroom space divided in half or maybe in thirds, the HVAC system is in one of those spaces, but it's not in all three of those spaces, right? So we have spaces that just because they were divided out don't have the proper ventilation because the system's not in that space. So what our standard has been ASHRAE, and you can see on this, there's a formula that ASHRAE uses. The engineering firm goes in, they take the measurements, they are measuring for outside air flow, and then they compare it to what the design outside air CFMs would be. If the actual airflow or outside air coming into the space is greater than the design, then the space passes. It's simplified explanation of it. We adjust for the number of students that we have in the classrooms. So in some of our spaces, in South, for example, we kind of standardized on 14 kids per classroom space, 25 in the library. And you can kind of see how all these spaces did. When we look at this one, for example, 108 that failed, it's how we have been treating that as per the advice of the engineering firm is that we can mitigate this space with air purifiers, because air purifiers essentially introduce about another 200 to 250 CFMs of outside air. So you take the 181 conservatively, let's just say, you add 200 to it with the HEPA air filter, and you bring that number to 381, which then puts that in the pass category. We are not occupying spaces that either have no mechanical ventilation and no window. So any space that has no mechanical ventilation and no window, we're not occupying with students. If it's an office space that a employee wants to occupy and continue to occupy, which is often the case, they obviously have the ability to do that, and we give them a smaller air HEPA filter system. If we have a window and no mechanical, that still provides us the opportunity to introduce outside air, which is what is the most important part of this, is the introduction of outside air. With a HEPA filter, we are then purifying the air in that space, which really kind of acts as our exhaust in that case, right? Because we're not exhausting the air that's in the room, we're filtering it and bringing it out at a level of purity that is 99% pure. The HEPA filter can also act as the outside air, introduction of outside air. So we do have classrooms and spaces in our buildings, again, not surprisingly, where, for example, it's not on this one, but there's only a radiator in the space, right? There's a window and a radiator. There's no mechanical ventilation because it was built in a time when they didn't do it. I mean, they had left the windows open with radiator. So we put the HEPA filters in, we get data, and we're able to use those spaces. When we see this kind of thing happening, something's going on. So when we have no green NA, we go back and make any repairs that we can make. If we find we just cannot get that space up with the repairs and be able to produce some data so we can kind of know where we are, then we don't use the space until we have the data. So that's really and we're doing every single room. So there's a lot of rooms in the Braintree Public Schools. And that really is kind of a high level summary of the process that we've been using. And I would say that we're now down to saying we know exactly the 3 or the 2 or the 7 spaces in a building that we need to continue to try to either repair or mitigate for the ventilation testing that you see in front of you right now. So we really are 98% complete.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Devon.
In some of those spaces, no matter what we do to supplement, we're never ever going to get to a pass based on physical, shall we say, deficiencies that exist. I think it's important that people realize that some of them are just going to have to be taped off and not used.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. Any other questions from the subcommittee? Okay, I have a couple, Dr. Hackett, if you don't mind.
No, certainly.
So I appreciate this. I think this is a great update, and I think it certainly helps us understand a little more how we're evaluating and mitigating the spaces, as we go. I think the other comment or the other question is, we can look at other flex spaces as needed if capacity becomes an issue as we work our plan, correct?
We can, and that, yeah, absolutely we can. And that has to be obviously part of the conversation as we try to get to full opening. I will say that those spaces like the media center, for example, at the high school, that we didn't schedule for any classes has been a saving grace for us, as we've had teachers who have had to go on quarantine. We've been able to bring the students who that teacher would have had into the media center, provide supervision. And because the teacher is not sick, they're in quarantine, they're able to continue to teach from home to our kids through the Chromebook. So having the flexibility to use those spaces in that kind of situation as swing space, so to speak, has been critical to us being able to stay up and running. So as we talk about those spaces, we just, we also need to keep an eye on, what will it look like when everyone's back? The chances are we could be in a situation where we could have more staff having to get quarantined if we're at 3 feet and more kids in the building. So that's a really important conversation for us.
No, that's great. And I think that's definitely part of the conversation we'll have over the next couple of weeks. There's just one other area, Doctor, I'd like you to touch on if you can. And I think there was a lot of question when we moved to the model we have at elementary this week about the cleaning agents and that kind of thing. And I know you posted the MSDS sheets, but I think, just if we could clarify that the chemical that we're using to clean is based on a spice, right? It's thyme oil. So I just want, if we can just give parents some comfort that we're not using a hazardous chemical, and all the data for the chemical is posted up on our website, and it's actually thyme oil that is the active ingredient that's doing the disinfecting, right?
That is correct, right. And we're not, we spent quite a bit of time researching, reaching out and asking people, looking at what other places we're using for the disinfecting. And it's been tricky because when you're disinfecting during the day while students are present, obviously that creates a larger challenge than what we would normally have, right? The kids go home, we clean bathrooms. The chemicals, in fact, that we use to clean the bathrooms have historically been more powerful than the disinfectant that we're using because it's all, it has time to sit too. So, we did spend a lot of time with it. I will tell you that it is on our website. There's, I'm trying to just pull this up real quickly just so you can see if I can. So if you can see this, this is on our website, within our redistricting plan. You can search for facilities cleaning and the actual data sheets on BioEsk are here. So you can call these up. You can see this, what's in them. You can see the actual label, so people can understand what we are using for a disinfectant. We're administering it through essentially a mister. The disinfectant is food surface safe. It does not have to be wiped up, which is one of the key parts of it for us in terms of our ability to be efficient in the turnaround between the cohorts.
Thank you. And my understanding is it dries fairly quickly. So even though there's only a short, whatever, hour and a half in between cohorts, that essentially it would be dry well before the cohort entered the class.
Correct. So we are, we're learning as we go, but we are using a fine mist. So it's not a lot of the solution that's going down. It goes on high touch surfaces, go in and spray the room, and we're out. It has a so-called kill time of the virus of 4 minutes. And to my, we believe and we know, and if we have issues, we'll make adjustments that it's dry before students return. But even if it isn't, it's still biodegradable and it's still safe.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee?
I appreciate that clarification as to what the reactivity for that and the contact times. Those are very important so that people know exactly what we're using. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Devon. Dr. Hackett? Did you freeze again?
No, I just muted, sorry.
Okay. We don't know the difference now between muted and frozen.
Exactly. That's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So before we move into the next thing on the agenda, why don't we talk about our meeting time? I know next week is a holiday week. I don't know if the committee would like to meet Monday or Tuesday evening. We could meet. Do we have a school committee meeting, Dr. Hackett, Monday?
That would be a conversation with the chair. We either need to meet next Monday or the last Monday in November. We would have to get one of those 2 dates in.
Okay.
The last Monday in November for the greater school committee meeting.
So why don't we see if we can meet as a subcommittee again next Monday? Does that work for everyone? Is Mr. Devon's thumb up? Same time, 5:30?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So doctor, let's put that on, let's get the notice out that we'll meet Monday at 5:30 and you and I can get together and talk about next steps as far as agenda goes.
Will do.
Okay. I noticed that we do have some folks from the public. I don't know if we had any hands raised or any questions before we're gonna, just so everyone knows, we're gonna move into executive session next, and we're gonna also adjourn the meeting. We won't be coming out of executive session back into regular session.
I don't see any hands up at this time.
Okay, so we'll have two motions then. We'll have one motion to go into executive session, and then we'll have one motion to adjourn. So we are
Mr.
gonna,
Chair, I'd
Yes,
like to
go
make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second.
okay. Okay, do I need to read this? I think I need to read this
Yes, you do.
comment. Okay, so we're going to consideration to enter into executive session pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21. And I lost part of the screen here. A3. To discuss strategy for the negotiation of collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the legal position of the Finance and Operations Subcommittee as declared by the chair. I have a motion and a second. Ms. Saros,
Yes.
Mr. Devon,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That is unanimous. And now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Saros,
Aye.
Mr. Devon,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That's unanimous. So I will see you on the other side in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Colin.